Have you ever walked into a room and felt a strange vibe, like people were watching you a little too closely? Maybe it was a subtle glance, a forced smile, or even a comment that felt just a tad off. You might have brushed it off thinking it was all in your head, but what if it wasn't? What if, deep down, people around you, friends, coworkers, even strangers, secretly envy you? Now I know that sounds like a bold claim. Envy is a heavy word, and most of us don't like to think we're the kind of person who inspires it. But here's the thing. Envy isn't always about jealousy over money, looks, or success. Sometimes it's about something much deeper, something you might not even realize you're projecting. In this video, we're going to dive into why most people secretly envy you, what it is about you that triggers those feelings, and how understanding this can help you navigate your relationships and live with more confidence. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's unpack this together. Let's start by talking about what envy really is. Envy is one of those emotions that's hard to pin down because it's rarely loud or obvious. It's not like anger, where someone might yell, or happiness, where you see a big smile. Envy is quiet. It's a shadow that lingers in the background, often disguised as something else, like criticism, indifference, or even fake praise. Psychologists describe envy as a feeling of wanting something someone else has, whether it's their possessions, their qualities, or their circumstances. But here's where it gets interesting. Envy doesn't always mean someone wants to be you. Sometimes they just want a piece of what you have, or they resent that you have it at all. And the kicker? Most people don't even realize they're feeling it. It's like an itch they can't quite scratch. So instead of addressing it, they project it onto you in subtle ways. That's why you might feel those weird vibes without ever pinpointing why. Now you might be thinking, hold on, why would anyone envy me? I'm just living my life. And that's exactly the point. You don't have to be a celebrity, a millionaire, or a supermodel to spark envy. In fact, the things that make people envy you are often the things you take for granted. Maybe it's your confidence, even if it's just a quiet self-assurance. Maybe it's your ability to stay calm under pressure, or the way you seem to have a clear sense of purpose. Maybe it's something as simple as your laugh, how it's so genuine that it lights up a room. These qualities, the ones you might not even notice, can feel like a spotlight to someone who's struggling to find those things in themselves. And when they see you embodying what they lack, it stirs something deep inside them. Not always malice, but a pang of, why don't I have that? Let me share a quick story to illustrate this. A few years ago, I had a friend named Sarah. Sarah was the kind of person who seemed to have it all together. She wasn't flashy. She didn't post her life on social media or brag about her accomplishments. But there was something about her that drew people in. She had this calm, grounded energy, like she knew exactly who she was. One day, we were at a group hangout, and someone made a snarky comment about how Sarah always seemed so perfect. It was meant as a joke, but you could feel the edge in their voice. Later, I asked Sarah if she'd noticed it, and she sighed and said, "Yeah, I get that a lot. I don't know why, but some people act like I'm doing something wrong just by being myself." That moment stuck with me, because it was the first time I realized that envy doesn't always look like jealousy. Sometimes it looks like resentment for something you can't even control. So what is it about you that might be sparking envy? Let's break it down. One of the biggest reasons people envy you is your authenticity. In a world where so many of us feel pressure to perform, to post the perfect photo, say the right thing, or fit into some mold, being unapologetically yourself is rare. Think about it. How often do you meet someone who's just real? Someone who doesn't seem to care about impressing everyone, who speaks their mind without fear, or who lives life on their own terms. If you're that person, even a little bit, it's like a breath of fresh air and a challenge. Because when people see you being authentic, it reminds them of the masks they're wearing. It's not that they hate you for it. It's that your authenticity shines a light on their insecurities, and that can feel uncomfortable. Another thing that sparks envy is your resilience. Life throws curveballs at everyone, but some people have a way of bouncing back that feels almost effortless. Maybe you've been through tough times, a breakup, a job loss, a personal setback, but you didn't let it define you. You kept going, maybe even with a smile. That strength, even if it's quiet, is magnetic, but it can also be intimidating. Someone who's struggling to get out of bed in the morning might look at you and think, how do they do it? They might not say it out loud, but deep down they envy your ability to keep moving forward. It's not that they want your life. They might just want your grit, your ability to face the world when things get hard. Let's talk about something else. Your joy. This one's tricky, because joy isn't something we often associate with envy. But think about the last time you were around someone who was genuinely happy. Not fake performative happiness, but the real kind. Maybe they were laughing at a silly joke, or their eyes lit up when they talked about something they loved. That kind of energy is contagious, but it can also be a mirror. For someone who's stuck in a rut, who feels disconnected from their own happiness, your joy can feel like a reminder of what they're missing. They might not even realize they're envious, but it shows up in little ways, like a dismissive comment or pulling away from you. It's not about you doing anything wrong. It's about them grappling with their own emotions. Now here's where things get a bit deeper. Sometimes, people envy you not for what you do, but for what you represent. Let's say you're chasing a dream, even if it's messy and imperfect. Maybe you're starting a business, learning a new skill, or just trying to be a better version of yourself. That courage, the willingness to take risks and embrace uncertainty, is inspiring, but it's also confronting. Because every time you take a step toward your goals, it reminds others of the dreams they've put on hold. It's like you're holding up a sign that says, "It's possible." And for some people, that's a hard pill to swallow. They might not admit it, but part of them envies your drive, your willingness to keep going even when the path isn't clear. At this point, you might be wondering, okay, if people are secretly envying me, how do I spot it? That's a great question because envy is slippery. It doesn't always look like a villain twirling a mustache. Sometimes it's subtle, almost invisible. One clue is when someone's behavior toward you feels inconsistent. For example, they might shower you with compliments one day, but then make a backhanded remark the next. That push and pull often comes from their own internal conflict. They admire something about you, but it also makes them feel inadequate. Another sign is when someone seems overly critical of things that don't really matter. Like they'll nitpick your choices, your outfit, your hobbies, the way you talk, but it feels personal, even if it's disguised as just joking. Why sure? That's often envy sneaking through, dressed up as something else. Another telltale sign is when people try to downplay your achievements. Let's say you share some good news, like you got a promotion or finished a big project. Instead of celebrating with you, they might say something like, "Oh, that's cool, but it's not a big deal." Or they'll change the subject entirely. That's not always envy, of course. Sometimes people are just distracted. But if it happens consistently, it might be a sign they're struggling to process their own feelings about your success. And here's the thing, they might not even mean to be hurtful. Envy is often unconscious, a reflex they don't fully understand. Now let's flip the script for a second. What if you're the one feeling envious sometimes? Because, let's be honest, we've all been there. You scroll through social media and see someone living what looks like a perfect life, and there's that little twinge in your chest. Or you hear about a friend's big win, and instead of feeling happy, you feel something else. That's normal. Envy is part of being human. But here's what separates healthy envy from toxic envy, what you do with it. Healthy envy can inspire you. It can push you to work harder, dream bigger, or try something new. Toxic envy, on the other hand, festers. It turns into resentment, gossip, or tearing others down to feel better about yourself. The goal isn't to never feel envy. It's to recognize it, learn from it, and let it go. So how do you deal with the fact that people might be envying you? Because let's face it, it's not exactly a warm, fuzzy feeling to know someone secretly wishing they had what you have. The first step is to not take it personally. Envy says more about the other person's struggles than it does about you. If someone's acting shady or distant, it's often because they're wrestling with their own insecurities, not because you've done anything wrong. That doesn't mean you should ignore bad behavior, set boundaries when you need to, but try to approach it with empathy. Remember that their envy is their burden, not yours. Another way to handle it is to keep shining. This sounds cliché, I know, but hear me out. When you dim your light to make others feel comfortable, you're not just hurting yourself, you're reinforcing the idea that it's wrong to stand out. Let's talk about relationships for a moment, because envy can show up in some unexpected places, like with friends or family. This one's tough, because we expect the people closest to us to be our biggest cheerleaders. But sometimes those are the very people who struggle with envy the most. Maybe your sibling feels overshadowed by your achievements, or your best friend is quietly jealous of your new relationship. It's not that they don't love you, they do, but their own insecurities can get in the way. If you suspect envy in a close relationship, the best approach is to have an open, honest conversation. Not accusatory, but curious. Something like, "Hey, I've noticed things feel a bit off between us. Is everything okay?" Sometimes just naming the tension can diffuse it. Now here's a practical tip for navigating envy in your life. Focus on gratitude. This works whether you're the one being envied or the one feeling envious. When you're grateful for what you have, it shifts your perspective. If you're the one sparking envy, gratitude keeps you grounded. It reminds you that your life isn't perfect, that you've worked hard for what you have, and that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. If you're feeling envious of someone else, gratitude pulls you back to your own blessings. It's like a reset button for your mindset. Try this. Every day, write down 3 things you're thankful for. They don't have to be big. Maybe it's a good cup of coffee, a kind word from a stranger, or the fact that you made it through a tough day. Over time, this practice rewires your brain to focus on abundance, not lack. Another way to deal with envy, both yours and others, is to build a community of people who lift each other up. Surround yourself with folks who are secure enough in themselves to celebrate your wins and honest enough to call you out when you're off track. These are the people who don't get caught up in the comparison game because they know their worth. And when you're around them, you'll feel free to be yourself without worrying about sparking envy or judgment. It's not about cutting out everyone who struggles with envy. Again, it's a human emotion, but about prioritizing relationships that feel mutual and supportive. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Why does envy exist in the first place? From an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense. Back when humans were competing for scarce resources, like food, shelter, or mates, envy was a signal that someone else had something you needed to survive. It was a motivator to get up and fight for your share. But in today's world, where most of us aren't fighting over the last piece of mammoth meat, envy often feels misplaced. We're not just comparing ourselves to our neighbors anymore, we're comparing ourselves to the entire internet. That's a recipe for feeling inadequate, because there's always someone out there who seems to have more, do more, or be more. And when people feel that way, they're more likely to project their envy onto those around them, including you. This brings us to an important point: social media. Oh, social media, it's like a magnifying glass for envy. You post a photo of your vacation, and someone sees it and thinks, "Must be nice." While you share a career milestone, and someone else feels a pang because they're stuck in a job they hate. The thing is, social media only shows the highlight reel, not the behind-the-scenes struggles. So when people envy you based on what they see online, they're often envying a version of you that's not even real. If you're active on social media, be mindful of how you present yourself. Not because you should hide your happiness, but because authenticity cuts through the noise. Share the real stuff, the messy human moments alongside the wins. It makes you more relatable and might even diffuse some of that envy. Now let's talk about how to protect your energy when you're dealing with envious people. Because let's be real, it can be draining. If you're constantly picking up on those weird vibes or dealing with passive-aggressive comments, it's easy to start doubting yourself. One strategy is to practice emotional detachment, not in a cold way, but in a way that lets you observe without absorbing. Imagine you're watching a movie, and the envious person is just a character playing their role. Their behavior isn't about you. It's about their story, their struggles. This mindset helps you stay calm and avoid getting pulled into their drama. Another trick is to limit your exposure to people who consistently bring you down. You don't have to cut them out completely, but maybe you don't need to share every detail of your life with them either. Here's another thought. Sometimes the best way to handle envy is to help others shine. This might sound counterintuitive, but hear me out. When you lift someone else up, whether it's by complimenting their work, sharing their success, or just listening to them, you're creating a ripple effect. You're showing them that there's enough room for everyone to succeed, that someone else's light doesn't dim your own. This doesn't mean you should try to fix their envy. That's not your job. But small acts of kindness can sometimes shift the dynamic. Plus, it feels good to be the kind of person who builds others up instead of tearing them down. Let's talk about self-worth for a moment, because this is at the heart of why people envy you, and why you might sometimes envy others. When you know your value, when you're secure in who you are, envy loses its power. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are they're not perfect, they're just confident in their imperfections. They've made peace with their flaws and focused on their strengths. That's the kind of energy that draws people in, and yes, sometimes sparks envy. So if you want to navigate envy, both yours and others, start by investing in yourself. Not just in a self-care way, though that's great, but in a deeper way. Ask yourself, what makes me feel alive? What am I good at? What do I want to contribute to the world? The more you align with your purpose, the less you'll care about what others think, and the less their envy will affect you. Now let's address something practical. How to respond when you suspect someone's envious behavior is directed at you. First, don't confront them, unless you have a solid relationship and feel safe doing so. Accusing someone of envy can backfire, especially if they're not ready to face those feelings. Instead, try redirecting the conversation to something neutral or positive. For example, if they make a snarky comment about your new car, you might say, "Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. What's been going on with you?" This shifts the focus without escalating the tension. If the behavior persists, though, don't be afraid to set boundaries. You don't have to engage with someone who's consistently negative or passive-aggressive. Protect your peace. Another thing to keep in mind is that envy often comes from a place of scarcity. When people believe there's not enough success, love, or happiness to go around, they're more likely to feel envious of what you have. You can't change their mindset, but you can model a different one. Show the world that you believe in abundance, that there's room for everyone to thrive. Share your wins, but also share your struggles. Celebrate others' successes as much as your own. When you live this way, you're not just deflecting envy. You're creating a space where it's less likely to take root. Let's take a moment to reflect on something cultural. Envy isn't the same everywhere. In some cultures, standing out is celebrated. In others, it's seen as a threat to the group. If you're in a community where humility is prized, your confidence or success might be misread as arrogance, even if that's not your intention. This doesn't mean you should change who you are, but it's worth being aware of the context you're in. Sometimes envy isn't about you personally. It's about what you represent in that specific environment. Understanding this can help you navigate those tricky social dynamics with more grace. Now let's talk about the long game. If you keep living authentically, pursuing your goals, and radiating positive energy, you're going to keep sparking envy. It's just part of the deal. But over time, you'll also attract the right people, the ones who see your light and want to add to it, not dim it. These are the friendships, partnerships, and communities that will sustain you. And as you build that life, the envy of others will start to feel less like a burden and more like background noise. You'll realize that their feelings are their responsibility, not yours, and you'll be free to focus on what really matters, becoming the best version of yourself. Before we wrap up, let's circle back to you. Yes, you, the person watching this video. I don't know your story, but I know this. You have something special. Maybe it's your creativity, your kindness, your determination, or just the way you make people feel seen. Whatever it is, it's yours and it's powerful. And when you lean into that, when you embrace what makes you you, you're not just living for yourself. You're showing others what's possible. You're giving them permission to shine too. So don't let the fear of envy hold you back. Don't dim your light to make someone else comfortable. Keep going, keep growing, and keep being unapologetically you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it gave you some insight into why people might secretly envy you and how to navigate those dynamics with confidence and compassion. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more content like this.